Welcome into Fishbowl Sports. My name is Chief here. I'll be doing the show solo tonight. We're all kind of busy. It's the holiday still. So tomorrow is New Year's Eve, in case you haven't noticed that. And tomorrow's New Year's Day as we kick off the 2026 year. So this will be my last broadcast of the year. So hopefully you will join us into 2026. We appreciate all the support here, among other things here. So let me make sure everything's going good. Yeah, we're all pumped up and we're all ready to rock and roll here. So I know there's been some talk about the Raging Cajuns in the transfer portal, and I'll get into why I'm not really too concerned about the running back position too much there. Because I think when you start really looking at it, I like to look at history. If you've been watching me for a couple of years, I like to look at history and the way it looks at, and the way the Cajuns present themselves, like in regards to running back and stuff. So Zylan Perry and Elijah Davis are the two big ones that hit the transfer portal. They kind of contributed over, 60-70% of the running game there. You do got Steven Blanco back there still. He hasn't committed to the portal yet, so we haven't heard anything on that yet. So we're kind of watching it to make sure that everything is okay on that end and see how everything's going there. But I'll give a reason why not to get too worried about the portal too much here, because the portal is the portal will take it and it will cometh away, right? So you'll take it as you can go. So what I'm thinking here is, if you look at the Cajuns and if you look at everything else with the Cajuns, what they got going on here, I will always say this, and this has been beaten in my head for years by coaches and my dad himself. A good offensive line can make skill position players look better than what they actually are. I'll give you a couple examples of like the NFL and stuff. Look at Daniel Jones and with the Giants. He goes to the Colts. They have a decent offensive line. He plays a lot better. The scheme fits him better. That's just the way it is. Some of these transfer portal people, we talked about the John Calipari thing. He thinks that they should be staying, 1 or 2 years in the same spot. Are they really making gains like the sit out a year kind of thing? Which we've also talked about in this show multiple times. Different people of us coming up and saying the same thing over and over again. I know that is part of the problem that a lot of these teams have here. And a lot of the times, when they get these agents and stuff involved, they start losing a lot more money than what they're actually making. So whenever you jump in that portal, that doesn't necessarily mean they're gone. They might come back to the roster. But I think, these are still 18 to 22-year-old people, right? They're 18 to 22 years old. They're trying to figure stuff out as they go here. I know people like, okay, like I saw the James Madison, like 11 of their starters are in the portal right now, which we kind of expect. If a G5 team does very well, they're going to get gutted. They're going to get carved up like a Thanksgiving Day turkey. That's just the way the business is set up right now. And that's how the Power Four is going to stay on top, because they can just keep. It's a farming system basically, like the minor leagues to major leagues. You can think of it like that. That's basically the best way to look at the transfer portal and the way it is here. We're just minor league college football trying to get called up to the major to make their NIL money. The only player that I've known of from the Cajuns that has actually worked out extremely well for is Terrence Carter. I think he made a good move there. He's playing in a CFP. He's definitely getting some more NIL money than he ever could make at UL. But Texas Tech is they bumped up by so like the girls that left UL, like the softball players, look, they played for our national championship last year, and I don't really blame them. It's kind of hard to say that you would turn down that much money if you're actually going to get that money, to play softball, and we're going to see that happen. It's the baseball and softball has already been affected by it. The people that said that it hasn't been affected by it, they're lying to themselves. That's just the way it is. Now I'm kind of curious to see how deep this thing's actually going to run. Is it going to affect how the postseason in baseball and softball gets played, and basketball too? Are we going to have different tournaments like the NIT tournament, but it'd be like the G5 and FCS, playing a whole different game because of NIL with basketball and baseball and softball. I love the way the postseason format is in basketball and baseball and softball. I hope they don't touch it, but They're gonna probably experiment. I think it will eventually get to those sports, unfortunately. I think if we're talking about this 20 or 30 years down the line, and NIL still this relevant thing going on, because you got to feed the beast here, basically. And the way it is, it always wants more. It never stops wanting more. So you're gonna have to try to figure. They're gonna carve this thing up until it blows up. Like I said, I do think this is a bubble that's gonna burst. Do I have any evidence of that right now? No. I think it's gonna eat up a lot of the programs here that don't really have the money, like the Big 12 and the ACC. I'm looking at y'all guys. Y'all better be careful, because once they're done with the G5 and stuff, they're going to be coming for y'all next. I mean, that's the way it is. Y'all might be knocked down to the G5 level pretty soon. It might be a power two. The SEC and the Big Ten is running everything anyway. And you got Disney, they're just as guilty as everybody else in this thing. They're the one throwing gasoline on top of this thing, and it's blowing up crazy here. So let's look at the transfer portal for what it is, and let's look at LSU. I'm not LSU. UL's transfer portal. I was talking about LSU last night. That's why it's got my brain all messed up a little bit here. So there's just so much to keep track of this stuff here. I don't like looking at the portal stuff. It's depressing. They had 1,377. It got updated since last night. 31 of them have committed to other positions here. There's the team thing. Let's go to Sunbelt. App State got hit pretty hard by it. I mean, so Zylan Perry, they haven't gave a ranking for him in the transfer portal. They're both like 3-star. They were 3-star prospects, 87. This ain't expected. And they only have 2 in there. But we know there's like Bryant Williams was another one. So on 3 doesn't really have everybody on here yet. And Millen, he was a STM player, but he didn't really play much. He was a running back, and he didn't really get much starting time, so it's not really as big of a loss. He's just trying to get playing time. I don't blame the kid. I really don't. You're trying to get playing time. A lot of these guys in the transfer portal just want an opportunity, and it's hard. I do think I will say some things that might actually end up helping college football with the portal and stuff, but they'll never do it. You can't get sued for it either. The only they could sue for it is if they're limiting opportunities, which is if they reduce the roster size of the schools. Now, what the Cajuns dealt with, if they reduce roster size, you got to start thinking like, okay, like the offensive line issues and stuff, injuries. I know injuries happen, and that's part of the game, but the number of spots you reduce that. That's just the way it is. There's only so many spots on the college football team that you can have. That'd be the way it is. Now, what's that magic number? I know they've increased roster size with COVID, and then they got back down to that 80, I think it was. But if they reduce it to like maybe 60, you start reducing the spots there. Gets a little bit harder, to deal with here. I think to have every position have, I know a lot of it's going to be offensive line, defensive lineman, because that's just the way they're probably the most likely ones to get injured of anybody, because you got to think offensive line, they're hitting somebody every play. Defensive line's hitting every play. They have to. People fall on top of them and stuff like that. So, but I think if you can figure out a way to make the roster size limit downward, you can actually stop a lot of people from moving around the portal. Also, in addition to that, you can also bring in what John Calipari was talking about with college basketball or from Arkansas and stuff. Give them one free transfer, then they have to sit out a year. I think that's a very fair way you would reduce the number of this thing here is. But, as of right now, that's just the way things are going, and that's just the way it's going to continue going here. So that's just the way it is right now. I don't really know of a path forward here. So we have, a couple of Cajuns in the portal right now, Zylan Perry and Bill Davis being the big name ones, and so we're going to see where they're going to go here. But like I said before earlier in the pod here, a great offensive line can make these like skill position players, wide receivers, running backs look a lot better than what they actually are. That's part of it here. They can make it look better. They can block longer. They can open the holes a little bit longer here. We saw that with Billy Napier and from 2018 to 2021 when he was at UL. And also, speaking of Billy Napier, I like how everybody says he's going to do really good at James Madison. That's a very good, interesting here. But here's something interesting that you'll need to talk about here, too. In 2021, NIL was passed into June, July 2021. Don't exactly quote me on the month there, but they all said he was going to do very well in NIL. But he only dealt with it at G5 level for maybe 5 months at most. He didn't have to recruit to retain anybody. I mean, that's part of it. He didn't have to recruit to retain anybody. So, is he really going to build up the same success? That's my question. That is the question I have. Is he going to be able to retain people once he gets done with a year there at James Madison? He hasn't done that at a G5 level. You can't say that he did because he left there for Florida right afterward. NIL just started in 2021. So, and he knew that roster wasn't going to be there once they got to that level. So that's partially probably why he left anyway. Besides the money, obviously. I mean, money always talks and everything else there. So it's hard to say if he's actually going to be really good at the G5 level. He might be good for a year, it might be a flash in the pan kind of thing, but he won't be able to build up the roster the same kind of way that he did at UL. That world and this world are two different ways of doing it. I think Napier's a good coach. I think he can develop people very well. He's very good at recruiting and developing guys and getting to that next level. It looks like here. I mean, look what he did here at UL. I mean, I'd be a fool to argue against that there. But is he going to be able to do it in this new world? He didn't handle NIL or Florida. But then again, playing with a lot more money, there's a lot more players involved in Florida there too here. He might do really good with the 2 year, then they go and do what they got to do kind of thing there, you know. But I think if the Cajuns can build 3-star linemen and build them up very well, like so I was kind of looking at I know LSU a lot their whole like offensive line is in the portal. Maybe Des and them can work some magic with them. Maybe some of them, you know, they couldn't move lines against they looked like they did very well against like, you know, the Western Kentucky's and Louisiana Tech. They were able to hold their own in that game. Those games run the ball a little bit somewhat. Um yeah, they did their opportunity there. So maybe that's it. Maybe they didn't fit the right system under Brian Kelly. You know, that I'll say that there. Sometimes you just don't have the talent. You know, that's just part of it. You know, like you go to college and you flame out because you just don't have it in you. And that's okay. Not everybody's meant to play football. I mean, there's like you look at the drop from high school, college, NFL, and that's part of it. You know, like we got to remember this though too. These kids are 18, 22 years old. They're waving a bunch of money. I remember whenever I was that age and thinking about all that kind of stuff there. Someone would have waved some money to go play some football at for a big name college or whatever. That's exciting. Even though I'm from here. I'm from Acadiana. Okay, like I'm from this area. I lived here my whole entire life. I haven't left this area. But if somebody waves some money in front of me, that's really hard to turn down. Life like that could be life changing money for me. You know, you're very impressionable at that age. You know, you're gonna follow your friends and stuff like that. Your friends tell you, "Oh, it's cool over here." They'll get you good playing time, and that's what these all these players know each other, or they know somebody that knows somebody else here. Usually, when you work in the industry or something like that, you make contacts and stuff. Especially more now because of the way the transfer portal is working out here. Think of all the players that Zylan Perry and Bill Davis have met just within their 2 or 3 years. They know at least 100 to 200 something players probably. You can like, or you know, probably so, and them beating like other like high school players too. In the age of social media, it's very easy to reach out and figure out how good a place is for you. You can go like technically like Houston isn't far for a lot of guys to go travel from Lafayette there. Why do you think Zion Chris? I'm trying to think the wide receiver from St. Martinville, Harvey Broussard. That why you think they all went over there, even though they were sitting the bench, they had contacts there, and they probably had some money that pulled them over there too. And like I said when I started this thing, I don't think it was like really a bad thing to really talk about here. But I mean, we're getting up to like 15 minutes to talk about the transfer portal and how we can fix it and stuff like that. But I don't think you really can fix it. I think this is just it's a bubble or a balloon. I like the balloon analogy a lot better. A little bit more durable than a bubble, you know. But it's getting bigger. That balloon's swelling up a little bit more. So whenever that thing pops, you better hope you're on the right side of the fence there whenever it does, because it's gonna cause some mayhem and destruction. You're gonna have a lot of people upset about it here because there's only so many ways that you can carve this thing up to where you get something that resembles anything there in college football here. So I got some good news to report. Raging Cajun men's basketball is on a winning streak. Remember how was talking about not to give up on this team yet here? I know people like to make harsh reactions and judgment and stuff and not really talk about teams, but this is why you never stop talking about them. And everybody else here, they're starting to win some games. They shot very well against Norfolk State. We were there. Was impressed with their 3-point shooting in that game. So they're 2-8 in their last 10 games. Now I want you to but they're 2-0 in their last 2 games. So that their wins have come against quadrant 4 net ranking teams, which it's gonna happen anyway, because that's just the way the schedule is. The schedule gets done out years in advance and stuff. So but a lot of their losses here, they just didn't make enough points here. But if you notice something, there's been an uptick. They had 63 points against Norfolk State and 76 points against ULM. ULM and Norfolk State, they're not doing too good either. This big test is against South Alabama, who they're 8-4. Then they get Southern Miss. A lot of teams are like 6 wins, 7 wins kind of thing in the Sun Belt right now. Arkansas State's 8-4. So that's something to look at here. So I want to know what the predictor says. The predictor is going to be kind of a little bit interesting here. So right now it's got the RPI at 339. It's got them getting 7 wins. I remember I did this like earlier last month and had them winning 4 or 5 games. Now it's got them winning 5 Sun Belt Conference games here. They get South Alabama at home. It's got them losing to South Alabama. Then it's got them winning Southern Miss and ULM. So that'd be big. But I will say this: I don't know if they're gonna. I don't know if you look at the teams they've played, like UNCW, they didn't give up like crazy amount of scoring until they went like Stanford, Santa Clara, like the California teams, basically. That's when they gave up the most points they have all year. So, and you know what? Those are better basketball programs. They're just a better basketball program right now than the Cajuns are. So, looking at that here and looking at all this is, I always said that when a team is hot with shooting, it typically can carry over game to game. You got to find the right people to do that kind of thing here. So, looking at the last 2 games, let's see how well the Cajuns have shot here. So, they shot 51% from the floor against ULM, and they were 47% from 3-point land. I know they were trying to get the 3 ball to fall earlier in the year, and it just didn't happen for them there. Free throw shooting from ULM had to get better. They only shot 55.6%, and they didn't get to the line as much as ULM did. They're luckily ULM, didn't shoot better from the floor. They would have lost that game. But they did shoot a lot better from the free throw line against Norfolk State. They didn't commit as many fouls, which I was happy to see that there. Against Norfolk State, they only had 12 when they had 23 against ULM. And that was, not really. They didn't have Quantus White in that game. He was suspended due to the escort off of Southern Miss's court with that call that the refs were doing, which I don't agree with the refs too much. I think they should have called that a lot earlier. It was getting way too physical with that one play or whatever. I can understand why Quantus was upset. Anyway, but you know what? You always want to look for a moment to inspire a team. That might have been it. Like, come on, let's get aggressive. Like, I want to feel that fire. That looked like that was kind of what's going on with Raging Cajun men's basketball right now. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I think they are inspired by that, honestly. And it might take things like that to fire you up. Your coach want to go out there and defend you like that whenever that happens on the court. Look, that'll fire up any kind of player there. Like, hey man, I want to play for this guy. Like, he won some massive brownie points in that locker room by doing what he did right there. Massive, because they all they're gonna fight for their coach, and I think that really probably did something for them there. Cajuns never let up. They won both halves. That's what you want, 63-54. They didn't let off the gas toward the end there. I was getting kind of nervous when they had like 5-6 minutes, because so many times during the season, they would let these teams come back and pass them back up, and they would get like a lead in the second half, like they're about to make a comeback, then they would fall at the end. But they did better job this time around. They didn't. Norfolk State got more offensive rebounds in the game, 11-8. Like the second chance points opportunity, I always say, is always a very good thing you got to look at here whenever you're looking at these teams here. But I see some good things. I see some good things, but I see some things they could work on and be a little bit better at here. Um, they did better at defensive rebound. They got more rebounds than Norfolk State, so they did control the glass a little bit. They did win the battle down low, so that's something that needs to continue here. Um, Cajun had 5 block shots. That's what you want. Like I said, when this team is this team is a very good defensive team, and I don't like for the Sun Belt. I don't think they're going to make a deep run in the tournament or anything like that, or make NCAA tournament. I'm not saying any of that here because there's so many outliers that could potentially happen here. So that is something that you're going to have to look at and see here as we go deeper into the season and stuff. So um, that's just the way it is here. So with ULM and Norfolk State, you're looking at it here, and it's going to be a very tough thing here. So you got South Alabama, Southern Miss, ULM, and Troy coming up for the Cajuns. Now they can beat ULM. They beat them once. They can beat them again here. I'm kind of curious to see how them Southern Miss and Troy games go. Like I said, I could care less how these results happen. Okay, they could, like I said, you can lose almost every single Sun Belt game if you win the Sun Belt Conference tournament. I mean, as long as you get enough to qualify and you do good enough and you win the tournament, you're in the show. So that's it. They're basically playing for like you're not going to get an at-large bid. The schedule is too weak to get an at-large bid. If we're talking about national championships and regular season conference, the regular season conference title is only going to give you an NIT tournament bid. That's it. That's all that's going to be, and that's the thing here. So that's why the NIT was set up to give these teams that like win the tournament do that kind of thing here. So I mean, I'm kind of like no one knows who wins the NIT tournament. No one really knows too much about it. So uh, Chattanooga won that tournament there, so that was really good for them. That was their first title. So automatic qualifiers or regular season conference champions. So yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at here. So that's you see, but nobody really talks about the NIT tournament. It's all about March Madness. It's all about the tournament here. So that's kind of the problem that we're all kind of like dealing with here as we go through this thing here. So looking at it here, I just think that the Cajuns are they're gonna do okay. I think they're gonna get a little bit better as the year goes on, and that you can just get more involved. You can get this thing going really good and just do that kind of thing there. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that that's kind of the way you need to go, like what needs to happen here. So, um, yeah, that's kind of the main purpose of it all. That's part of what we got going on here. So, looking at it here, looking at everything is that's what I think. I think so. I'm glad that the men are starting to turn it around here. I know the predictor wasn't too kind to them, but if you want my prediction, why not? I think like I said, I think if the Cajuns scored a little bit better, like even against the Southern Miss game, they only shot 35% from the floor. If they shoot like if they get 5 or 10% more from the floor, they win the majority of these games. Maybe not Louisiana Tech or whatever, because Tech was shooting 44 from the floor. Southern Miss wasn't shooting that good at all. Cajuns actually beat them on the floor, but they ended up losing the game because Southern Miss was just trying 3-point shots. That's kind of the big difference. That's 6-point swing right there. That's a big difference there. They won by 8 there, but because if they got to the free throw line a lot more though too. Cutting down on the fouls is a big thing for the Cajuns, and they look like they did that in Norfolk State. So if they could do that, if they can cut down the fouls, and if they can shoot a little bit better, like do what they just need to do what they did against Norfolk State, and I think they'll win a lot of games. That's it. That is the formula that the Cajuns need to have right here. Now the 3-point shots, you're not going to hit every single one every single game. They made 10 of them. They shot 27 times from 3-point land. They're 37%. Norfolk State was 39. They're a little bit more accurate with the shooting, but not much here. They didn't take as many 3-point shots at the Cajuns. They shot four less there in that game. But look, that's what I'm talking about. If they can make those 3-point shots and they can land, you got a good recipe for a lot of success there. So Jackson Olvera has been doing a very good job there. So that's something to that's what we got to look at here. So looking ahead the next 3 games here, I know tomorrow I will be at the Cajun Dome on New Year's Eve. Um, it should be a very fun game. I'm excited to see how all this goes for the Cajuns and stuff here. Uh, I know the women played last night. Let's give a little shout out to them. They got their first win. I know they've been having a very tough year so far, but look, as long as they can turn it around for conference play, they're in the same boat as men are. I could care less if they make the tournament and win the thing. They're in the dance. That's kind of all you need, honestly. They lost their first 2 Sun Belt games, Texas State and Southern Miss. You're kind of like, it's over, but they did beat Dillard, and that was their first win. Maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need that a little bit here. They got Troy coming up on the January 1st. Then they got South Alabama on the 3rd, coming up at 4 o'clock. That's Eastern time, so 3 o'clock Central time in that game here. So that's part of what's going in the ULM Texas State. So, like I say, they just need to win enough games to get to March here. I know that's been kind of like a thing that they used against Bob Marlin, like, oh, he only cares about the last 4 games, because it's honestly true. That's the thing. Like, we have to be honest with ourselves a little bit. We want to win the regular season championship. But what do you want? Do you want the NCAA tournament or do you want the NIT tournament? That's kind of the question that we need to ask ourselves here. Which one would you rather happen? Everybody would say the NCAA tournament. I don't know a single person that would say NIT tournament. Would we get more transfers in if we made it if we made a regular season tournament, championship and won the Sun Belt regular season tournament championship? We probably would in basketball or whatever, but like I said, I think I'd probably rather take a losing conference record and go make March Madness, kind of limping in there, because basketball is one of the weirdest sports out there where you can just get hot and start winning the whole entire thing. That's just the way the sport works. So that's kind of the way that we're looking at it here. So you don't have the benefit of playing a tough conference where you can kind of like do that kind of thing there. So at noon tomorrow, December 31st, Rage Educated Men's Basketball takes on South Alabama. So they will play them again in Mobile on January 17th. So that's at noon on Saturday. Cajuns play Southern Miss. So if you want my prediction for the week, I need to see a little bit. I need the blueprint of Norfolk State to be studied. If they do that, they'll win the majority of their games. I'm not going to predict them to win every single game, because I just don't think that's the way it's going to work. I don't think that's going to be a logical answer. I do think they'll split this week. Now, South Alabama is a really good ball club this year. They are doing a very good job. Let's look at who they played so far, because that is very important. You could play a very like a very weak schedule like the Cajuns do, usually in basketball, and you can it benefits you, right? You look better than what you actually are. So, too, as well, like in terms of the committee, this is just a schedule they're playing. Let's look at South Alabama. You only can play who's in front of your schedule. I do think the Cajuns are getting better, though, a lot better, and I'm excited. Like, there's a glimmer of hope that I'm looking at here, and it's looking very good for them. Like, they're starting to turn the corner, and you were kind of hoping you see in it. I saw it kind of coming here, because you're like, okay, they just toned by 1, 2. It's like you're never as bad as you are when you're losing. You're never as bad. There's 1 or 2 things that you could tweak, and then you end up winning a bunch of games. They're 8-4. They played against Toledo. They won that one. Alcorn State, Spring Hill, they won that one. So they had 3 wins there. Central Michigan, Coppin State. So a lot of these teams they played against haven't been really that good. Their best win is Toledo, from what I'm looking at so far. New Mexico State's been pretty good. Their RPI is 63 and 110. So yeah, best win for them is New Mexico State and Toledo here. They lost to Texas State, so and they went to double overtime against ULM and ended up winning that one. So I'm not, and they beat Mobile 85-52. So I mean, non-division. They have two of their wins are non-division one wins. So record's kind of misleading a little bit here. They they've kind of struggled in Sun Belt play, to be honest. Um, because Cajuns beat ULM in regulation, and they played in the same. Like the most common opponent they have is ULM so far. So not much to base it off of there, but I do think so. Give me the win against South Alabama. I think they'll drop Southern Miss. I think they can do that because I'm not too impressed here. They might, but they could very well. Like you look at the Cajun, like the Cajuns are doing bad here, but when you start looking at the schedule here, that 3-11 is a little misleading a little bit here. RPI 339, net ranking right now 330. So when you start looking at that, where you're like, okay, this will be tough to kind of like swing it and stuff, but yeah, that's part of it right there. So that's what you got to look at here. So let's go share. I'm gonna share this live here real quick. I should have done this earlier. Usually I have other people here with me. Jalen does have the day off, so this is kind of a thing right now. Let's see. No, I gotta do a see more. Copy that. Let's go share this to other pages. Get that kind of going here. If it's your first time watching us here, thank y'all for tuning in. We do this every single week. Let's see. The education. No. I'm in the wrong page. I need a switch. I was on Raging Fishbowl. Yeah, Raging Fishbowl is our exclusive page dedicated to all Raging Cajun sports, but we go live on the Fishbowl Sports page because it has a bigger audience, obviously. I mean, that's kind of easy to see why we would do that, right? Let's do the basketball fan page for the Raging Cajuns, which I'm glad they set up these kind of pages here. It's really nice to talk to all the Raging Cajun fans, what they think and stuff. So, yeah, but like they're shooting better, like so that I do see some signs that they're looking better, and I think the blueprint for the Cajuns going forward, if you're because that's literally the blueprint that they need to follow. If they follow said blueprint very well, they will win a lot of games in the Sun Belt. If they do exactly that, because they're so close. They were so close in those games when you look at like the numbers and the numbers kind of like added up a certain way. You're looking at this like, okay, cool. Then we might be able to have something here. But it's close. If it works that close there and that way, the numbers really help you a lot. Because like if they cut like all the Cajuns had to do that Norfolk State. If you look at the stats and you look at the what the game I watched the game was and I was like I was remember talking to Mike Contra because me and Mike Contra go to all the basketball games. I remember talking to him. I was like, there's not a lot of fouls being committed. It was a very fast paced game. It didn't get slowed down a lot because you had a lot of fouls. It was very fast paced. I was like, dang, it's halftime already because I was watching the game. I was like, dang, it's halftime. So yeah, that's part of it there. So I was very interested in it. I was like, let's do this, man. Like this is kind of cool to see how everything's going on there. So um yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it was a very good thing here, but that's the blueprint. That is exactly the blueprint that the Cajuns should be using when they get into this kind of thing here. So that is a part of it here to see what's going on. You know, that is what you need to have happen there because if they can do that kind of thing there, you can look at that and you can really like look at this kind of thing here and see what's going on here. If you look at it, it'll be very good and you will have a lot of success doing what you need to do here. So with Kiwanis and all of them, I think they found that blueprint very well. Norfolk State, is going to be the blueprint that they use for the rest of the year because you shoot that good on the floor, you're going to have a lot of success here for the Cajuns, your men's basketball team. Shooting that well and having that kind of success there is a very big factor. And with like we talked, me and Jalen talked about this weeks ago. You're one or two things away from always winning and losing games, right? So that's what that needs to happen and what needs to, so that 10% differential. Whenever you look at on from the floor up that 31.5% Norfolk State shot to Louisiana's 41.2%, that opens up a lot more opportunity. Cajun shot 51 times, but they didn't need to make all the shots there. 54 for Norfolk State. See, they were a lot more efficient. Efficiency is the key to winning a lot of basketball games here. They didn't get as many second chance points here like Norfolk State did. Norfolk State had 11 offensive rebounds, Cajuns had 8 defensive rebounds. Cajuns were better on the glass on the defensive side of rebounding, 26 to 23. Steals, Cajun had 6 steals. Norfolk State had 4. 5 block shots. That is a big one right there. And the personal fouls, Cajun only committed 12 fouls in this game, compared to what they had 23 against ULM. That's one of the areas that we were highlighting to watch going ahead here. If they can keep this, I'd say you don't want more than 15 fouls in a game. You could do 7 fouls a half, 7, 8 fouls a half. You'd be in good shape, which is kind of like about around the number that you want to have anyway. You don't want to give them too many free opportunities here because giving away 8 fouls, you're potentially giving up 16 points. Not maximum, but if like depending, 3-point shots, stuff like that. So you don't want to give up like and one and stuff like that. So you don't want to give up no 3-point plays on the foul line. So that's something that needs to happen here for the Cajuns to keep going. So if they can win this game against South Alabama, I think it's going to be a really big one here. But like we talked about South Alabama. We kind of looked at them and seen, and it's kind of like, hey, like what's going on with their schedule is kind of misleading. They played 2 teams that are really like a Dillard, right? Like the women's team played and they ended up beating them. So their record is a little like, it's higher than what it looks like here. So that's something to look at here for the Cajuns and stuff. The Cajuns haven't played any like low like teams that are popping up here. They've all been like Division One, like Lamar and stuff like that, and McNeese and stuff. So they've played these teams here. Like McNeese is having a good year. Stanford, Santa Clara, they all have teams under the like 150 RPI. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that they play. They're under 150. Like, let's look at net ranking. So you see Davis is at 161 net, so they're kind of a little bit higher than you would like there when looking at the Cajun schedule. So their quality of opponents are a lot better than South Alabama's. Like looking at their schedule like this and looking at the Cajun schedule like this, and it's the Cajuns played more higher quality opponents than South Alabama, so I think they'll beat South Alabama when it comes out there tomorrow. So that's my pick here. So I think that's kind of the way that it's going to go here. So that's my pick. And you know what? I think I'm out of time. I'm going to go get me some lunch here. This, like I said, this will be our last broadcast for this year. Thank y'all for tuning in to this episode here of Fishbowl Sports. If you like the show here, you can follow us here on Facebook and all of our social media, X, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff there. We do have a Fishbowl store that we have available for you to go see here. You go on Instagram or YouTube, wherever you're watching it right now. They have a QR code for Fishbowl store right there, and you can support this stream here. We have a QR code for that as well, which will all monetary donations go to Fishbowl Sports, and we don't, it all comes here. We do this for free for y'all, take time out of our day to go do this here. So it's always fun. So thank y'all for tuning in here. We'll be a great and wonderful day. We'll see y'all here next time here on Fishbowl Sports. Have a good night.